Well, look who's here.
Hey, Consequences just showed up.
Exactly.
How are you, Deb?
I'm doing fine. How's Pennsylvania?
It's cold. It's cold.
Yeah.
That's the meteorological weather analysis portion of the show. It's still friggin' cold. It's February in Western Pennsylvania. Enough said.
Right.
But
Well, I thought for a fact I'd wear a scarf around my neck, although we are like 60 degrees today.
oh, boo hoo.
I know. I told people I live in Arizona. Our long winter nightmare of 2 weeks is finally over.
I was just gonna say it's like people that live in Florida. It's 64 degrees out. It's we gotta bust out a jacket. It's like don't start. No, just stop it.
I know. Every winter I spend an hour going through the house looking for my gloves. I can't remember where I put them.
That is not a bad problem to have. I assure you. As I said, people ask what the weather is like here. So New York is cold. I said Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania is a special kind of glacial cold. It really is.
Yes.
But which is why I somewhat hibernate for the winter.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, it's kind of what we're made to do, I think.
But
Anyway.
I tell you, speaking of off the, I guess I might as well start at the beginning. I haven't done
Yeah.
any research on it, obviously because it's
Mhm.
so contemporary. It's not something we directly forecasted, so I'm not going to, pretend that we did. Um, but the repeal of Dodd-Frank and the repeal of the fiduciary responsibility. Um, so, is Trump still the worst thing to ever happen to Wall Street?
Yeah, we can talk about that because I'm sure the knee-jerk reaction from people is, see, he's just a friend of the bankers after all. And I'm going, no, you're not seeing the whole landscape here.
No, that's in the interest of. Well, I have to say, I mean, as a previously licensed 7 and 63, the repeal of the fiduciary responsibility. That's something that anybody that has any kind of exposure to any kind of retail financial advisory, be that through your local bank or your retirement or whatever the case may be. That's significant to keep in mind. I'm not going to call it terrible, but it's something that people
Mhm.
need to be aware of. Okay. And I don't necessarily, again, as a licensed 7 and 63, I don't necessarily agree with that. The fiduciary responsibility component of what Obama did, not that I agree with him on many things, but that wasn't the worst regulation ever happened. That stopped places like, if you guys have ever seen the movie Boiler Room or, stuff like that. It
Mm.
stops those kind of places. I mean, the old fashioned, I mean, it's kind of ironic. I said I could almost hear my wardrobe coming back into fashion. I said it was going to be the 1980s V2.0. Here we go again. And it's like, all right, if it's going to be the Wild West again on Wall Street. I mean, it's just something that people need to be aware of. Especially if he repeals that component of it. He hasn't said that he's going to yet, but again, as somebody that was FINRA NASD licensed, it's something that people need to be aware of.
Right. Now, whatever Trump is doing, he's actually looking very forward thinking, right? He's looking beyond the crash that's coming and laying the groundwork for the recovery, isn't that?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's also validation of another thesis that we presented, and I think I mentioned it on your show,
Mhm.
as a matter of fact, which is there is, prior to the global economic reset that we do so enjoy talking about, there is going to be a period of time where it's get what you can get while you can get it. The implosion
Right.
of empires is typically preceded by that, or the implosion of a
Mhm.
currency, or the implosion of a nation, or the implosion of a banking system is going to be prefaced and preceded by, all right, if you're smart enough to figure out what's going on, well, that's your time to get what you can get while you can get it. And watching him repeal Dodd-Frank and watching him repeal the fiduciary responsibility, that's a major, I'm not going to call it a forecast proven correct and make the smug face, but that is certainly an indicator that that kind of period of time is coming up again, which is, again, I mean, for those that are old enough, you remember, the 1980s, where it was just cold call, chop shop, sell what you can, get what you can, super competitive bonfire of the vanities type stuff. That certainly, it appears that's what he's lining up for. Now, how long that's going to last is unknown. But if I was going to set those that know what's going on up for ultimate success, that is certainly something I would look at first is, all right, green flag, get what you can get while you can get it, total free for all. So Again, I just think it's hilarious that so many mainstream outlets were saying that he was going to be the worst thing that ever happened to capital markets. And we said it a year in advance. I think I mentioned it again on your show, which was, no, he's Wall Street's wet dream, just a new version of it.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's certainly, for as best as I can tell, it's certainly it's time to pillage, so to speak, and that is preceding the implosion of be that the U.S. dollar, the Anglo-Western banking system. And I mean, most recently I retweeted the article. Now they're confirming that Japan is taking a pivot towards the Far East, and it's like, oh, we didn't see that coming in 2014. But again, I mean, it just goes, it flies in the face of that mainstream narrative of, oh, he's going to be terrible for Wall Street. He's going to be terrible. Wall Street doesn't want to see him get elected. Really?
No. Yeah. And speaking of the dollar, and you were talking about Bitcoin yesterday, did you want to talk about anything new about Bitcoin?
Not particularly, other than the fact that, no, guys, it's still not money. Yes, it still is a trade and a way to launder money. Apart from that, though, it's, we've been trying to kind of work on a thesis here a little bit, which is can Bitcoin be used as a bit of a, pardon the pun, as a bit of a leading indicator for precious metals? And I'm still not confident enough to say that, 100% that, hey, keep an eye on Bitcoin, because as Bitcoin goes, so goes precious metals, at least in directional trend. Obviously that statement's not indicative of value, but insofar as, the ability to use Bitcoin as a bit of a leading indicator, I'm not going to say that for sure. Do we factor that in now to some of our metals trend forecasting? Yeah, absolutely, 100% we do, but I'm certainly not confident enough in the research, and we've been doing a lot of it, to say that, yeah, Bitcoin, because there are no naked shorts on it, because there's no interest in repression on it, that, does it react first to stuff like currency instability? Does it react first to stuff like currency devaluation? And as much as I would like to say, hey, we've discovered this magic secret formula, we haven't. But insofar as Bitcoin goes, I mean, it's tradable. It's tradable just like precious metals. The only thing is Bitcoin is a temporary store of value. That's not a so-called fiat. It's just a digital fiat. It is still a so-called temporary store of value, so it's tradable. I mean, it trades on an exchange. So, when we endorse, or we're not endorse, but we encourage the trading of Bitcoin, and I say this, until I'm almost blue in the face, which is, we're not endorsing it as money. We're not suggesting that, hey, it's going to be, a replacement for precious metals. I had a conversation with somebody on Twitter about that, and by conversation, I mean absolute rant. Mm-hmm. Anybody that's going to tell you that Bitcoin is the new system and it's replacing gold, okay, is either intentionally misinforming you or grossly misinformed themselves. Okay, so, but insofar as Bitcoin, I mean, it's been kind of business as usual. I mean, we got a level very correct on it. In our switch and signal, I don't like to share too much out of switch and signal in the interest of those that obviously do pay for the subscription, but we had the levels very correct. So, just after that run up to like 11 and change, it was like, okay, everybody chill, relax, cool off, enjoy the profits from the trade, and then, put some buy orders in at 950, 965, because that'll probably be another run up. And it's exactly what happened. So, that's kind of an instance of 4.0 and ultra proven correct again. So, we're pretty thrilled about that. But apart from that, I mean, Bitcoin is still Bitcoin. It's still, dust off a spot on your shelf next to your Pogs, your Beanie Babies, and your silly bands. All right. Because that's where it's going to wind up.
Right. And it's speaking of smirking, we were having way too much fun yesterday. There was just so much coming across in the headlines that just matches everything that we've been talking about for months. And I wanted to say, you might want to issue a disclaimer to all of your subscribers that reading your data reports could cause permanent smirking damage on people's faces.
Yes, it's caution. Reading Wirehouse may or may not lead to permanent smug face. Your mother may or may not have been right. If you make that face too long, it's going to stay that way. Well, no. It's if you read Wirehouse and the Grand Street Notes report, you may find yourself walking around uncontrollably making a combination of the smirk and the smug face. Yes, that's true. But, I will say insofar as the Ultra and the 4.0 system, especially credit due to the 4.0 system for the last, 2 years at this point. Well, not quite 2 years, year and a half. It's not enough, again, for us to get the election narrative right. I mean, that we did. We got who's going to win the election. Is Brexit going to be yes? I mean, though that's become almost passé at that point. And it's not. I hope that's not construed as egomaniacal or arrogant. It's just the system's that good that we built here. Ultra, there's not much I can say about Ultra. I'm still trying to find the words to really kind of to quantify what that system is, or more importantly, what that system could or is going to be. But insofar as the smug face, yeah, I mean, it's one thing to get, to say Trump is going to win, but it's another thing to almost in the exact order that he has been acting to, kind of the legislation, and speaking of, lifting Russian sanctions. It's one of the first orders of business that he had. I mean, and you especially. I mean, I include you in a lot of my tweets of my smugness, my "haha, told you so" stuff, and it's just been. I mean, I think you'll agree. It's been like rapid fire the last couple of days. In the first 100 days in office, it's like, does he subscribe to Wirehouse too? Is that you using that as your administration's instruction manual? Would you buy all the Grant Street notes or something? But it's been pretty wild, and I mean, it's. And credit where it's due. There are other folks that have gotten, certainly components of that narrative very, very correct, you being one of them, insofar as what he's going to do. So it's going, it's going according to plan.
Right. I was reading today, in fact, on Rogue Money, James has an article about the Trump spokesman who has told Brussels and the EU that they're acting like Stalin, Soviet Russia. So he's definitely, I mean, you want to talk about a warlord.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is? I think the 90% now, I've divided Trump's voter base, and I think I may have mentioned this openly on your show. I've divided Trump's voter base into two categories. Those that elected him knowing what he is, and those that elected him that are going to find out the hard way what he is. Right. Okay? Those are his two voter demographics. There's seriously, I mean, I don't know how to put that any other way. There's 10% that voted for him knowing damn well exactly what he is, and then there's a 10% that voted for him that are going to find out, again, the hard way, what he's all about. Okay? And insofar as his international relations, if I may digress here for a second, I don't like to rip on anybody because, it's just not my style, but for God's sakes, can we get a new White House spokesman? Can we just get rid of Spicer immediately? All right, you want to talk about friggin' deer in the headlights? And that can't be an easy job, under President Trump. But the way he's handling international diplomacy, and then, I mentioned this on another radio program that I did, who guy hosted. I have a tremendous respect from Dr. Janda. It's Operation Freedom. I mentioned this on his show as well. There's something very different about Trump. Okay. And you can see that even in the inauguration process. Okay. One of the things that I saw that I thought was really kind of entertaining and hilarious is when he was signing all his cabinet members in, the protocol is that you're supposed to use a different pen and then hand the pen to, there's a set order there of how that's supposed to go. And it didn't look like a president being sworn in. It looked like an M&A meeting. I mean, it was just, there was that certain level of informality there, and that's carrying over into his international diplomacy. And I think that just scares the hell out of a lot of people. I mean, the most recent one, CNN did a whole day on it. I watched it for my own morbid entertainment. They did a thing on what does he mean by on notice? And, as we forecasted, he's building an administration of lunatics. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. But he's building an administration of solutions-oriented, get stuff done. The fewer questions you ask, the better. And that's carrying over into international diplomacy, and that's the trend. I mean, one of the things that we forecasted that I think is kind of interesting is we said if he wins, or rather when he wins, he's going to inspire a lot of people that would normally not serve in the public sector to do so. It's going to be the rise of the businessman statesman, which is kind of the Putin model, if you really think about it, right? Yeah. So you have Trump, and now you got, as forecasted, Kevin O'Leary up in Canada. He's going to follow the same formula that Trump did. You got Le Pen, who mysteriously, by the way, and you tweeted this to me, mysteriously shows up at Trump Towers having lunch. Her poll numbers go up double digits. Apparently that's the Trump effect. You just get close to him and you start winning, apparently. But you can see that, and we forecasted. I mean, when we were doing back in the bad old days, as I call them, our test of concept phase, we called it. We said there's not going to be just one. There's going to be a whole bunch of them. We're starting to see that new management team rising to power. And yes, in keeping with the theme of today's show, that's exactly what it is. It's consequences. All right. And I mean, you can even point to after what what Trump did with the we're going to have a new friend in Israel. Wait till I get there, and no, surprise. There that went.
Yeah.
Called it. Called
Right.
it.
Speaking of Marine Le Pen, and I don't know if everyone caught this because this didn't really make a big headline, but there is a bad terrorist attack against the Louvre Museum in Paris today. So and I figured, well, that's going to be like what happened in Canada just a few days ago, so this will solidify Marine Le Pen.
If you follow the recipe that Trump used, okay, and you run for office, I don't like to use this word because as a technologist, okay, they say if you make a machine idiot-proof, somebody will build a better idiot. But the fact of the matter is, if you follow Trump's formula, not his delivery style. I had this conversation with somebody yesterday. For those that are running for office now, that bombastic, over the top of the head with a baseball bat style, that's Trump. That's who he is. That's him really being him. But if you can take that same message, that same formula, and I said it's like making a drink. It's you got your ingredients: nationalism, populism, unspoken racism, isolationism, and a new form of globalism. If you can take all five of those, shaken not stirred, you're going to win. And I think that's what we're seeing. Like a Le Pen do. We're seeing certainly Kevin O'Leary, and they're making it easy for him. Every one of those Muslim terror attacks is good for a boost in the, really, that's what it is. It's, you saw it with Trump. You saw it with Trump. I mean, for the first, how long was he running for office? Every time there was, the Muslim shooting and the mass shooting and this, that, and the other thing, it was a boost to him, But that's the recipe at this point. Shaken, not stirred. And Germany, that's coming.
Oh, yeah.
And it's starting to look like now something that you and I spoke about at length in early 2014 is starting to happen. When you and I said it's going to be a drag race between France and Germany to see who pulls the next EU exit move. And surprise, surprise, look what's setting up.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening, the French elections will be set around May the 8th is when the decision, and then the German elections start in the summer. I don't think a lot of people in this country understand how the European elections go. It goes in rounds. And then the German election should be concluded, I think, in October. I'm not sure, but I think that's when. So we've got quite a few little periods of time here to see the setup of events.
Yeah, and it's looking dangerously like stuff that you and I and other folks in internet news have spoken about. Again, I mean that's a good point, by the way. The European elections are like Formula One qualifying. It's like okay, you're done, you're out. I think that's a pretty kind of a neat formula. It really is kind of cool. It's like, all right, you're on the bubble. All right, get out next. It's pretty cool. But insofar as what's happening in Europe, just make peace with the following fact: the EU is going away. Okay, if the EU survives as a functioning entity for another 3 to 5 years, I personally will be amazed. Okay, that's going away. There is so much pressure to just destroy the EU now that it's not an if, it's a when. And those European elections, okay, are all for our metals investors, and certainly for those that trade the paper metal stuff, converting paper into more paper into metal. Those are all major catalyst events. Okay, you have a Le Pen win. That's going to be upside for gold. Okay, you have any speak of a Frexit. Okay, that's upside for gold. You have any speak of a German exit, and it's kind of ironic that Trump kind of threw them a bone a little bit. When he referenced their economy as being highly undervalued.
Right.
So that was kind of a nod and a wink as to what's coming. So, insofar as it pertains to metals investing, I mean, the reality of the situation is all of those catalysts now are starting to line up exactly like we forecasted. And I just think it's what's completely hysterical now is that you had Yellen hold rates, right? Fed rates unchanged. What do you do? Trump's Twitter account has more of an effect on dollar strength, dollar weakness, and currency valuations than the friggin' Federal Reserve. That is, I've said that before. I said that on another show before, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
The volatility that's in this market now, and the not I want to call it unpredictable, but the sheer, that's the word I'm going to use, the volatility of the current global economic climate. If you can't figure out that there is that reset coming, then I don't know what else to tell you, really.
Right. And what you were just saying about the EU going away, that was, I think it was Malak is the guy, Trump's ambassador to the UN. I think it's he who has already announced that he's already shorting the euro.
I want to be on Trump's text messaging list. I want to be one of his friends. Okay, that before he makes any kind of legislative decision, Blue Horseshoe likes Endicott Steel. Come on, seriously? You just elected some permutation of Gordon Gekko to the White House. So if you just make peace with the fact that that's going on and deal with it. How do you like that? But again, I mean, you look at the people that even he's appointing, to these positions, and the one that I almost fell out of my chair laughing at. Speaking of, kind of in that dark, sinister, smug face sort of way, was Bannon.
Yes.
Bannon, national security clearance. I can only make a very educated inference as to why that might be, but I'm not going to mention it because I promised somebody else I would make that reference on their show. So, as someone of the word, I will not make an inference, but I think you and a lot of your listeners can figure it out. Okay. Yeah. You got other than that, you have to wait till the 26th. But he put Bannon. He short-tracked Bannon to give him a national security position. I went, and there it is. If you can put the narrative together, and if you can kind of figure out what's coming, that removed any and all potential doubt right there. So, right. But that aside, you can see the people that he's appointing. You can see the way his administration is functioning like a business, not like a government. And as I've often said, welcome to the new normal. Deal with it.
Right. And yesterday, another little event that most people didn't notice was the meeting of Vladimir Putin with the Prime Minister of Hungary, Orban. And that I got to tell people that the interview is in the Russia Today YouTube channel. Go back and listen to it because they've laid out what's coming.
Believe it or not, I hadn't taken a look at that. When I don't research something, I say I don't, and this should be one of those instances where I can say confidently I don't. I was too hung up on wondering what the Mutual Admiration Society phone call between Putin and Trump might have sounded like.
Well, yeah, and this interview with Putin and Orban is being, carried out at around the same time that the releasing of some of the sanctions is getting announced, and the Russian stock market goes up.
Oh yeah, if anybody needs Vlad, he's out buying himself one of those new motorcycles, or maybe Putin can just send him one of those Harley Davidsons from the most recent meeting. Right. Again, we called it. For those that trade oil specifically, we said that those sanctions were going to be lifted. That was job one of Trump. All right, was to get those sanctions to go away, and that's why he was installed. Elected. And the fact of the matter is, once again, evolution proven correct. As he lifts those sanctions, all of a sudden, watch the price of oil start to increase again, because that was, again, as we've suggested, just to make sure we provide a very complete narrative here. That Vlad opening the faucet and flooding the market with cheap oil, that was only a response to sanctions. It was, F me, no F you 10 times harder. And he killed the U.S. oil shale industry. So. With that being said, we kind of knew he was going to lift the sanctions. Like I said, I would have loved to have been on that phone call to see what that Mutual Adoration Society sounded like. That's got to be like my buddy and me. So as far as what's setting up, the writing is on the Anglo-Western banking system, as it is known, is going away. That's not fear-mongering. That's not sensationalism. I don't pretend it has anything to do with any Jubilee years, Shemitahs, Shemutas, Shemitah Buddhas, Shambalambas or whatever. That's just the natural evolution of economics, and it has everything to do with something called speed of information and the fact that there is a new form of globalism out there. So, and we spoke about this at length on the last interview that we did, is that, it's not that globalism is going away and we're returning to a fractalized nation or a balkanized planet, excuse me. where it's made in America, by America, and that's just the end of it, and there isn't a rest of the world. What's being set up now is an intermediary step towards a new form of globalism, one that's certainly more beneficial to industry and technology and the development and the progress of a species, okay, at the planet level. So it's a new form of globalism. That's what's setting up. And I've kind of used the analogy, and somewhat colloquially so, which is, before you can integrate a nation into this new global order, and I can already hear more devout clutching their heads and the chills shooting up and down their spine. Before a nation could be integrated into a new global order, which ultimately, yes, will likely feature a unified metals-backed currency, either in paper form and digital, or simply just digital. There need be some house cleaning that takes place, and that's really what Trump is. Trump is the demolition man to the United States two-party political paradigm, and dare I say he's the demolition man to a lot more than that. And the idea is, if you're going to re-engineer a nation to the extent that the United States needs to be re-engineered to be integrated into that global financial order, surprise, you need somebody that's a walking, talking, force of chaos. And that's what he is. Okay, so and you can see that happening in other nations. Watch, it'll start once Le Pen gets elected. It'll start up in Canada. So that's really, and again, it's not me being excessively arrogant, perhaps a bit smug, but if all this sounds vaguely familiar, we've been perpetually way ahead of what's going on from that top level stuff, and that's what we do. Insofar as the research that we do, it is that 30,000-foot view of the battlefield, that macro kind of global chessboard, if you will. So, that's really, to that extent, that's what's going on.
Yeah, I'm always telling people it's not the end of globalism. It's the change from unipolarism to multipolarism. So I know there's this big contingent of people on the internet who think the New World Order is being defeated. No, it's not that there wasn't just one New World Order plan. There were different versions of it. And we are passing through this transition between the unipolar model to the multipolar version.
I call it the non-polar model.
Okay.
Singularity. Okay. It's the non-polar. It's a one planet, one world. And again, I know I can just hear the chills ricocheting up and down the spines of the more devout, but it is a unified global system. And that is the product. You have to understand why. That is the product of speed of information. That is the product of available information. That is the product of, I dare say, a collective boost in planetary intelligence in some cases. So we're transitioning. It's not, you could say we're going from a unipolar world to a multipolar world. I said the non-polar world. Mm-hmm. Okay? There is going to be only one perception available, called the truth. And this is all over. Right. Okay, like it or not, I'm sorry, your version of the truth, or what you think is the truth, is not the truth. There is a reality. Yeah. Put my sunglasses on, deal with it. Okay.
Right. And to those who are not familiar with the use of the word, the singularity, this is something Ray Kurzweil is always on about, and the Google Corporation is a big part of this whole push towards the global mind stream.
Sure, absolutely, 100%. You can even look to other companies that are funded by DARPA, obviously, amongst others. You could look to IBM. Talk about a company with tremendous survivability. That a lot of people counted IBM out so many times, and yet they're still going. You look at Watson, what they're doing there. You can look at Google, you can look at Apple. And I just think it's hilarious that Elon Musk recently, the CEO of Uber, whose name just escapes me at the moment, obviously for political reasons, he chose not to serve on Trump's advisory council. And, Elon Musk of the Tesla company stayed on board regardless of political perception. I said, isn't that ironic if you study history? Companies are, I have a list of them. I share that in Switch and Signal, and certainly in Wirehouse, which is there are some companies out there that are GER proof, or global economic reset proof. They're recession proof. They're depression proof, because their technology is more valuable than the financial system at the moment. Okay, their technology is more valuable than money. All right. So really, at the end of the day, you can look at a company like Tesla. That's not just. And I mean, I just think it's hilarious recently that they dropped the motors from the Tesla Motors brand. Okay.
I was just going to mention that.
Yeah.
As if they weren't already. Oh, they were always planning to do that, but the timing had to be right.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've spoken with people regarding, Tesla as an investment or Tesla as a trade, and they say, well, they received all these ridiculous amounts of funding from the government. And my answer to that is good. At least they're doing something right, because the technology that they're developing, I mean, you look at Elon Musk's interest in space exploration, something else that Trump was very forward about is, we need the American space program back. And that's something I 100% agree with. But at the end of the day, I mean, you look at some of these companies, Amazon with what they're doing, really, I mean, these companies with SpaceX, the technology is just so far beyond that I consider those companies GER proof. I consider them economic reset proof. And the fact that despite being a somewhat politically or perceptionally unpopular decision by, Musk to join on that Economic Advisory Council, another myth I would like to disprove, or at least, attempt to disprove, which is they say, well, Trump is going to be the worst thing that ever happened to the technology industry. That administration is not going to be technology friendly. Absolutely 100% untrue.
Right.
He is, at the end of the day, a business-friendly president. And what is technology? Technology is a business. He likes to build stuff, okay? If you can't tell from his history, he likes to build stuff. And technology certainly falls under that heading. So the idea of the left jumping up and down, saying he's going to be terrible for technology, he's going to be the most, scientifically unfriendly president. I go, oh, you don't. I guess you're in the 90% that either did or did not vote for him based upon what you thought he might be, not what he is.
Right. So. And he made that perfectly clear in his inauguration speech. I tell people, go back and listen to it, or at least read the last 2 minutes of his speech. And he directly came out and said, it was like practically an announcement of the new technologies that are coming.
Yeah. And like I said, I have a short list of companies, one of whom, new customer to Evolution, brilliant guy, he made reference to, and he goes, hey, Nick, what do you think of this? I said, let me see what you got. I said, you know what? I said, that's worth doing some research. So I did a custom equity research report, and we recently added it to our list of GER, economic reset, economic condition. They're insulated completely, okay? And it has to do with microwave energy technology. And it just proves that I don't care if I have more subscribers or more listeners than, X, Y, or Z. I don't care, because we have some of the smartest. I promise you that. And the fact of the matter is that just the company they brought to my attention, I researched the technology. I just went, oh, yeah, so you got a winner on your hands there, man. Great call. But those are the kind of I call those next-gen technology. That's fourth industrial revolution or fourth industrial evolution technology, which is, by the way, I guess, hey, I can make the smug face again. A lot of smug faces today. As far as the drastic and dramatic and sustained increase in civil unrest as the result of Trump winning. And all I keep thinking is, go ahead, keep it up. Robotic autonomous policing, complete with microwave energy weapons, coming to a street near you.
Oh, no kidding. I was going to mention that about the thing with Berkeley, and the line I put in my YouTube description here, cannibalism is the highest form of transaction, something like that.
It's the simplest form of transaction in nature. Think about it. You got to chase something. You're chasing it for a reason. Okay, you're going to burn calories and you're going to ingest calories. That's the ultimate deal.
Right. And I've seen this from Lionel Media, and from so many are noticing that what happened in Berkeley is the left, the Hillary crowd is just completely imploding on themselves, and they are cannibalizing themselves and destroying themselves. They're removing their own self as one of Trump's obstacles.
Well, what's happening now is exactly what's designed, or one of the reasons that Trump was elected. In the first place, he is that volatile. He can create that effect, and it's not the first time throughout history we've seen one guy just naturally create that polarization, that chaos. And what we're seeing now, in terms of our linguistics research, and we do this in reference or as it pertains to the relevance of our chaos trades. Taser, Strom Ruger, Smith & Wesson, LRAD, FLIR, those tactical personal defense plays, we call those the chaos plays. Now, all of a sudden, CNBC and Fox Business and and Bloomberg, they're all saying, is that a growth sector? And I think you retweeted that article. It's like, is unrest a growth sector? It's like, yeah, it has been. Yeah, that's 2.5 years ago, pal. You know, but the fact of the matter is, one of the things that we've seen linguistically as far as a collective or top level sentiment shift, and we categorize our variables at different levels. Okay, one of the towards the top is the overall sentiment in the United States towards these civil unrest events, and I think that UCLA Berkeley, that was that Milo character, right?
Yep.
And all of a sudden there's just massive civil unrest. There's just this, complete chaos, and you got to realize it's poking the beehive. Is what they're doing. They're doing it on purpose, and you're seeing these civil unrest events become, and the variable that we've seen shift. Okay, I call it the Korean market effect, and there's a reason for that. If you remember during the LA riots of '92, the guys that were up on the roof with the AK-47s defending their business, getting headshots, were all the Korean market owners in that portion of Los Angeles that was, Koreatown. That they just went, oh hell no, we're going to do something about this. What's kind of happening now is you're getting that collective mindset shift towards, all right, this is getting a little ridiculous. Every time he passes legislation, or every time he makes a decision, or every time he passes an executive order or a piece of legislation goes to Congress, there's going to be this civil unrest. So now you're starting to see this kind of collective shift, which we forecasted over a year ago, to the kill them all, let God sort them out mentality. Okay, and all of a sudden that's making it to mainstream, where people are just getting sick and tired of that. And I call it the rioting for sport, or the civil unrest for sport. So the natural transition is going to be away from less than lethal technology to just shoot them. And you're starting to see that really. I mean, at a linguistic level, as we consider that one of our not top level, but one of the kind of bigger variables that we consider, or greater value variables that we consider. You're starting to see that sentiment shift in the United States, where it's just like, just shoot him. And I was like, well, that's all going according to plan. Man, it's ridiculous.
Right. Was there any other topics you wanted to touch on?
I actually made show notes. Let me see.
What?
This is I know. Oh, the wall. How could we
The wall.
How could we go through this whole interview without talking about my favorite Pink Floyd album, which is Dark Side of the Moon? No, the wall. They told you.
Yeah.
I get to say kind of told John. Our research indicated as to why, and it's got absolutely the square root of Jack Poo to do with any component of immigration. But I just think it's hysterical that he put, what's his name in, Secretary of State, whose name is going to escape me, Tillerson. Rex Tillerson. He put him in, and of course right away the questions, what's his relation with Gazprom and Gasflot and Russia? It's like, oh, now you guys are starting to figure out what's going on. Congratulations. Welcome to the party. But you look at that now. Tillerson is one of the. I'm sure he's well aware of the oil shale that's under Mexico. And that's why that wall is going to get built. So for your listeners, if I could share a really important piece of information, especially for those of you that are actively trading, any kind of energy, especially obviously crude oil. Those oil prices are going to have to come up, so shale becomes a viable industry again. And we've been starting to see some of the headlines mainstream now suggesting that that's the case. It's like renewed interest in the U.S. shale industry, and it's like, well, no kidding. But that wall is going to get built, and that wall is going to get built as to protect industrial interest. If you guys want to see something really interesting, and I did this in a recent edition of Wirehouse. Right off the bat, Trump's saying, don't make us send U.S. troops into Mexico. And I was like, oh, that sounds like the Iraq plan all over again, except in a different hemisphere. And that's what it's going to be. There's for those of you that are not familiar, I'll paraphrase without getting into the super geeky, nerdy details. There is a lot of oil shale under Mexico, a lot of it. Okay, like almost Saudi Arabia. Think of it as Saudi Arabia west, if you will. All right, and I kind of said, just in Trump's mentality, it's don't make it. And if you look at where the cartels are all kind of headquartered at, it's right on top of all the oil shale down the Gulf Coast of Mexico, and it's like, oh wow, this looks vaguely familiar. Excuse me. I said so for him to build that wall as a means of just kind of securing that, and I've said he can pull off what I consider politically one of the greatest illusions ever sold. Okay, and he said he was going to get Mexico to pay for that border wall. Okay, and you're probably not going to get that done with a 20% tariff. It's just not realistic. I mean, he may try it, but it's not long-term sustainable and it's not long-term realistic. But what you can do is you can pull the same stunt that China likes to do ever so often. And they're very good at it, which is if they go into a third world nation, or if they go into a nation that may or may not have the technology, the resources, the manpower, whatever the situation, or the budget, whatever the situation may be to extract various natural resources, they do, you know, universally advantageous bilateral trade where they go, hey, what do you guys need? Oh, we need infrastructure, schools, roads, bridges, tunnels, hospitals, water filtration, stuff like that. And the Chinese build that in exchange for a portion of the resources that are sold out onto the open market. Now, that's why people like, you know, nations like when the Chinese come in, because they build stuff. You know, they don't try any regime change. They go, hey, that's how you guys do it there? Cool. All right, we'll play along. This is neat. You know, and that's why they're so welcome in so many different nations, especially, you know, the BRICS alliance, the AIIB. Trump, you know, as a student of that, can certainly pull the same illusion with Mexico. Okay, which is, you know, well, you got, you know, X gazillion barrels of oil under Mexico. I'll tell you what, just do me a favor. We'll cut you a little bit better deal. All I need you to do, right around re-election, about 4 years, just do me a favor. Say you guys paid for some or all of the wall. That is what I will consider politically the greatest illusion ever sold. And it can be done. And it's right out of Putin's playbook. You know, so I'm sure he'll have coaching on that.
No kidding. And do you think that Mexico will also take advantage of their silver resources in transitioning to a silver-backed currency?
Of course. You know, it's the same reason, you know, nations have tried to invade Afghanistan for the last how many years, and that usually goes well, doesn't it?
Right.
You know, they call it the graveyard of empires for a reason. There's more gold and silver, not even that rare earth minerals under Afghanistan than anybody realizes. All right, you know, the Russians, you know, circa, you know, the 1970s, they invaded Afghanistan, 80s. You know, that I'm sure that was not lost on them. You know, that there are tremendous natural resources, amongst other things, under Afghanistan. But as far as Mexico taking advantage of both gold and silver, one of our perennial favorite gold miners does have a tremendous interest in the precious metals that are in Mexico, particularly the Yucatan Peninsula area, you know, down way south. But insofar as Mexico, as, you know, as a nation, and with the immigration, I mean, that wall, I've said this a million times, and it's kind of a bitter pill to swallow it, but swallow it you will. Fact of the matter is that wall has got very little to do with immigration, just predicated upon the fact that nobody really knows the real statistics, and we're certainly not going to pretend that we do either. But, you know, there's already 11 or so million, you know, so-called undocumented, so-called illegal aliens or immigrants, whatever, in the United States. Guys, that's like building the city wall around a medieval city after it's been invaded. It doesn't work. All right, you don't need to be an anthropologist, an archaeologist, or a brain surgeon to figure out. You know, it's like getting invaded and going, you know what we need to do? Build a wall. It's like, really? You know, so I said, however, I said that's not a solution. I said, what really is a solution, on the other hand, I said, is a let's say, right-wing, fired-up Republican, gun-bearing, frothing at the mouth, you know, kind of, you know, American populist, high on nationalist rhetoric. If the dollar collapses, who do you think they're going to point at first? It's those immigrants. Oh, wow, that recipe still works. Okay, have at it.
Kind of be wanting to get back to Mexico.
You would think.
And that's what, right. And that's what we're saying, is that the wall is going to be something that Mexico will welcome. They're going to need it to protect their resources.
If it's done unilaterally, and again, I mean, Trump being a study of Eastern banking, of Eastern business philosophy, you know, no question about that. You know, with him being a study of that methodology and of that approach, you know, for him to, I mean, to provide the illusion, because you don't know what conversations take place, you know, obviously completely off the record, where it's like, you know, the president of Mexico. I mean, I think that's pretty legitimate. I mean, that was just a Twitter feud going on there, and that was kind of, I don't think that was an illusion, but, you know, it's, again, you look at Mexico, and it's going to be, are you going to play along, or are you going to be replaced? You know, and I don't think it requires that much of a stretch of the imagination to really see that that Mexico would want that wall there. Okay, especially now if they're going to all of a sudden, you know, you're going to have, you know, these bigger oil companies coming in, I'm sure, with Chinese and Russian consultation help, you know, coming in to extract all the oil shale and stuff. They have to weigh, first of all, the whole cartel thing, I kind of laugh at that. And I go, yeah, they're used to, Billy Bob and Jim Bob on quads and, and Suburbans and stuff like that, or maybe one or two helicopters. I go, all Mexico has to do is go, do we make more from tourism or from the cartel trade? Oh, we make more on tourism and legitimate business. Okay, make them go away. Okay, and Trump would be, it would guarantee a second-term election almost. You sent the friggin' U.S. military after the cartels. Oh, isn't that a tough guy? Cool. But that's, as far as the wall goes, again, at the end of the day, I've said this many times, and I guess we can kind of conclude on this with speaking of consequences. I said you can build that wall without a single brick. You can build that wall without a single piece of fence. The technology exists, and it's used in the military now to patrol areas like, the Pashtun Mountains, okay? Thousands and thousands of miles of just ridiculously unhospitable territory where they use combination of satellite imagery and high and low altitude drones and manned aviation units. You can create a 1,000-mile long border wall if you want without laying a single brick. So the reality is, well, why would he build a wall? Why the physical wall? Because that is purely symbolic. And it's easy, and that's the narrative that he sold his voter base, brilliantly so, I might add. So the actual construction of a physical wall is purely a, hey, look what we built, symbolic kind of thing. Now, what technology goes on that wall is unknown and yet to be determined. That's where consequences come in. But insofar as the actual construction of said border wall, he does that, and I've said this, I said, all he's got to do two things in office, and he's already pretty much done them both. Which is he's got to repeal Obamacare, which he's promising, and I guess in the process of doing that, and he's got to build a wall. And then he can sit back for the next 4 years and just relax, and then get reelected and do whatever the hell he wants. Really, that's what it comes down to. And we're seeing it. It's surreal for me, like I said, to watch a lot of the stuff that we forecasted play out, because it is almost it's beyond. I don't like to believe, but it's almost beyond belief. Where you're like, wow, we forecast that, it's really happening, and we knew that was going to happen, but still.
Right.
But,
well, very good. Is there anything else you want to plug your website and all that?
I probably should do that. Should do that. That's a signature of mine, forgetting to promote my own stuff. Well, if you guys like what you hear, you're interested, we have pretty much all the 2017 stuff up there. I do have to post one more guide, hopefully this weekend. We have our Grand Street Notes guides. That's no subscription required. Those are $100 a pop, and those are the compilation of Evolution 4.0 and Evolution Ultra research on a fairly wide variety of topics. They are topic specific. We have our gold and silver trading guide up there. We have our petroleum oil trading guide. We have there's one other one up there. It's we're going to have our chaos trading guide up there. Hopefully, like I said, by Sunday. I got to do a little bit of editing work on that. And we have our 2017 macro overview. That's the one I was trying to think of, which is actually a reader suggestion, which is kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of our economic macro level research that we do. We have our switch and signal for those of you that are actively trading the market. We deliver that once a week, usually Sunday night, Monday morning, hopefully before market opens. We've been pretty good at that. So that's kind of our executive summary format style, where it's if you are actively trading the market, especially the commodity stuff, guys, that's our favorite. But, we lean obviously heavily towards equities, because we make options plays on those and stuff like that. That's kind of the publication that you want. That's $25 a month. You get 4 of those a month. And then, of course, we have our Wirehouse. That's the flagship product. That's our deep level research journal. So if you guys are interested by anything that I've said on this interview, as far as, the stuff like the wall and what's going on with the BRICS nations, the Japanese pivot to the east, that real deep level stuff that may not pertain to a specific trade yet, but it's just deep level social, macro, technological research, that kind of stuff, our forecasting. That's Wirehouse. That's $100 a month. Okay. And we got our podcasts up there. That runs the range: Bitcoin, gold, silver, alternative investing, technology forecasting. So those are the podcasts. I'll just make this point here real quick. The podcasts are very handy for if you're not familiar with a lot of our work. And I know there's folks that have been listening to what we're doing here at Evolution now, coming up on 4 or 5 years, which is cool. Bankster Slayer being one of them. But for those of you that are not familiar with a lot of our research, and we kind of have our 1,000-mile-an-hour delivery style, so a lot of it, I admit, we take for granted that people know, and they don't. So we produced a podcast so you can, at least in terms of stuff you might be interested in, metals investing, petroleum, Bitcoin, et cetera, you can get a pretty good foundation. So when you do listen to some of our stuff, or you read some of our public stuff, or you see our public YouTube, kind of videos that we put up there, at least you have a foundation as to, what we're talking about. So that's kind of our run there. And by the way, I will be the first to make this announcement on your show. 2017 may very well be the last year we publicly share information. So that's kind of a big one. We weren't sure if we were going to continue doing that or not. We may still, but it's looking like 2017 is kind of a bit of a victory lap year for us here, just because we've been proven so right. And it's nice to see people really finally starting to see the value in the systems that we built here, and we understand that. It's I've said it many times. You walk up to somebody on the street and you tell them you built a program that's better than 90% accurate. You're going to have people that are going to look at you and go, "What, are you out of your mind?" It's a big difference when you have the depth of track record proven that we do. So 2017 very well may be the last year that we share this stuff publicly, because we don't have, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. We're not going to half-ass it. So unless I can devote the kind of time to present the quality product, the market update videos, the wirehouse, because that's all me doing that. We're not going to. So for those of you that do, are interested in this stuff, want that forward-looking stuff, guys, now would be good, as we so often say, because after 2017, we very well may not be sharing publicly anymore. We may produce the annual guides. We don't know yet, but that is something I want to make clear.
Right. All right. This was a great interview. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks again for having me on, by the way. Another 3 months, we got Hawaiian shirts, I promise, as for our last interview. Another 2 or 3 months, I'll be sitting here smirking ear to ear, except I'll be margaritas, Mai Tais, and Hawaiian shirts.
All right. I'm desperately miss the Hawaiian shirts. Yes.
Excellent. Thanks again for having me on, though.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Be good. Cheers.